Well, thank you very much. And, I want to acknowledge, first of all, our ancestors who have gathered with us here today. And sometimes we forget about that teaching, that we're not alone, that we have with us our relatives. And a part of our responsibility or connection that we need to make is to reach out to those ancestors, to ask them to help guide us as we talk about important things like this and share with people the teachings of our ancestors. So I want to acknowledge them and thank them for being here. And then I want to thank you guys for being here and the appreciation I have for the work that you have done in your lives and the commitments that you have made to the communities and to all those souls and spirits that you've helped along your path. And I'm grateful for that. You have really contributed to the wellness of our community in ways that we'll only know in the future. So thank you so much. Today we're going to be talking about using and teaching the circle process. And as we know, the circle is a very powerful symbol and a powerful way of sharing, learning, and healing in most, if not all, Indigenous traditions, not only here in North America, but also around the world. And we have here with us today our guests that have years and years of experience in utilizing the circle as a process in a way in which we support our communities, provide guidance, and provide decision-making processes. And you all have had the opportunity of utilizing the circle process in community building, conflict resolution, family group conferencing, and there's so many more other things that the circle has been used for. So, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about what I would think about the circle processes and that, but rather listen from you all in terms of what you have seen, how you have used the circle, and how the circle has affected communities, and perhaps how it'll be helpful in the future as well. So the first question, and how we'll do this, is that we'll do the circle format. So we might as well start with Maggie and work towards this. But first, I want to share some information about Maggie Hodgson and the work that she's done. She's a member of the Carrier First Nation. She's a leader in the fields of Aboriginal health, justice, and reconciliation. Her profound commitment to addiction awareness has guided people to wellness and influenced communities in Canada and around the world. She served as CEO of the Nietzsche Training, Research, and Health Promotions Institute, which launched the first Healing Our Spirit worldwide gathering in 1992. Maggie is a recipient of the Order of Canada, an honorary Doctor of Laws from the U of A, and many other national and international awards. She has co-authored 4 books and had a tree planted in her name in the Peace Park in Israel and has advised the UN on addictions prevention. She's a wife, a mother, an auntie who has helped raise other children and values building relationships in families and communities within the limits of our humanity and with the Creator's guiding hand. As well, we have Sharon Steinhauer with us today. She lives in Saddle Lake Cree Nation and is a team lead for social work programs at University Blue Quills. Blue Quills is committed to reclaiming Indigenous knowledge and practice and has established programs that students of all cultures describe as transformative by bringing both Western science and Indigenous wisdom into the curriculum. Circle process has become a key feature of social work, education, and many other programs. As well, today we have with us Mary McDermott. She is sharing her wisdom on, she has shared her wisdom on developing a guide to effective relationships with Indigenous communities. She has a Master's of Education and also a social work degree, and has worked in child welfare and family group conferencing using the circle process. So 3 very powerful ladies, and I'm honored to be here sitting with you, and I hope that I'll learn something as well as we move along. The first question that we have, and again, we're handing this over to Maggie to start this, is how did you come to the circle process, and what was your introduction to using the circle in the work that you do?
I think I'm gonna only half answer your question, okay? I think my first experience is I come from the Dene people, and we have a potlatch, and our potlatch is a circle with the clans. And our clans are in communion with looking at spiritual well-being of the collective. That's my first experience, and certainly there's a strong protocol and practices that are followed within that particular circle. And I think that when Cree people come to our potlatch, right?
Been there.
It can be really enlightening, and it can be scary, right? So there are many kinds of circles, and so that's the circle that I was born and raised in, and it's an important part of where I come from. I was fortunate that I married me a Cree 48 years ago, and so I'm mated with a Cree for 48 years.
It's a record, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And so I was brought into the Cree world, and since I don't live with my own people, I live with Crees. I follow a lot of things that are taught here by our elders because they're all the same thing, whether they're Dene or whether they're Cree in terms of the principle. And the big principle I think that's important about circles is that in Western society, they think step 1, step 2, step 3. I think, it's not about steps, I think that's the challenge of getting and working with people from other world views. I think that the thing around circles is not where you sit, is not how you sit. I think it's how we use our medicines in a circle. And our first medicine is the first thing we do when we're born is we breathe. The last thing we do when we die is we breathe. So when we talk, and how do we use our wind spirit? What kind of voice tone do we use in our wind spirit? How do we relate with our water spirit? How do we look at each other? How do we listen? Do we listen just with our ears, or do we also listen with our eyes? I think that those elements of a circle and of a relationship, I think is foundational and gets lost in step 1, step 2, and step 3.
Yeah.
Because they forget when they walk into the room, they're in the circle already. Your spirit is already there, brought you forward. I really have strong opinions about that, so I'm good. That's it. My opinion.
Well, I didn't grow up with circle. I'm non-Indigenous, married into Saddle Lake Cree community 44 years ago. And actually my first experience with circle was attending meetings with my husband and as an observer, a listener, and a note taker. And I would hear people talking, and I would see this process of people individually offering their voice, and then at some point somebody would say, so we've decided then that this is what we're going to do. And in my white mind, I'm thinking, well, how is that decision being made? I didn't see a vote. I didn't, see a show of hands. I didn't realize that what I was seeing was consensus building in action. So that was my first introduction to circle, and then through ceremony, so that I've come to know some of what Maggie was just shared. And as I went into addictions work for 17 years, we use circle in interventions.
Yes.
And then in social work, we use circles in so many ways. But that was my first introduction, was actually in community process.
Yeah.
And mine, I guess, my first experience with circles was when I was a student at YTC, and we had an elder come in and do a sharing circle with us. And in the beginning, I thought, well, this is stupid. What are we going to be doing here? Like, in my mind, right, I was thinking, this is silly. Until I got the feather. And then when I took hold of that feather, I don't have words to describe what it was that happened to me, because I don't even know what happened to me either.
Yeah.
It was like something, when I was holding on to that feather, I was in a time in my life where I was doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, especially while I was going to school for social work. And all of that stuff came out in the circle process, and I didn't know where it came from. I was shocked at what was coming out of my mouth myself. So much so that I went to the elder afterwards and I said, what just happened here? I don't understand what happened. I didn't mean to say those things. And now I was scared, right? Because I had said things that could hurt me. And he said, this is circle process. And what happens in circle process needs to happen in circle process. And the words that you spoke, maybe they weren't for you, but for somebody else to hear them, he said. And I want to thank you for sharing what you did, he said, in the circle. And then after that, when I went to school at Blue Quills, and we were introduced to circle process there, like all of our classes were grounded in circles. And I began to understand the first time I did the training with family group conferencing, I had what we call an epiphany. And I knew at that moment that this is what I was here to do. This is why Creator put me on this earth, was to utilize circle process. And I've been doing it ever since, and I love it.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't do anything. So
When I hear you say epiphany, make me think Catholic,
Right?
And that's okay.
I'm Catholic too. But I thought, oh, what's another word for epiphany? Because I really think that spiritual opening.
That's what it
that
was,
happens,
Yes,
Maggie.
it is. Yeah.
Yes, that's what it was, and I could literally, I could feel it in my body, like you said, a spiritual opening. It was like something opened up my skull, and there was like light, and I could physically feel my body getting warm.
Yeah.
That's how it was.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a very, very powerful tool that really is quite surprising for non-Indigenous people who haven't practiced that cultural aspect before, or even Indigenous people who haven't practiced that culture before.
Yeah.
I was introduced to the circle when I was quite young. I think it was around 10 years old, I think. And my father was the vice president of the Indian Association back in the heady day of the Indian movement, 68 to 74.
The Indian Association.
Of Alberta, yeah.
That's what I thought you said.
Harold was the leader,
Okay.
and the chiefs and the elders were very much a part of that leadership. What was interesting, and this is where I remember it specifically, is when they were talking about responding to the white paper that was presented by Chrétien at the time.
Important.
The wisdom of my father was to bring me out to all these meetings. At the time, I didn't call it wisdom. I said, "What are you doing, dragging me out to meetings like that?" But he said, "What I want you to do is watch." And so I would watch. And so I would see the elders sitting in circle, and a question would be posed, or an issue or a problem would be posed. And then the elders would start to talk, one at a time. And they would stand up and they would talk. But also, before they spoke, they would rephrase what the last person said. So, I get it right, is what they would say. Did I get right what you said? Then they moved around the circle. And then it took a while, but it went around, and they finally came to a consensus. And I found that to be very powerful. And then they would say, let's go to ceremony, let's go to raise our pipes together tonight. And then we go in there, and then it was like the same thing. The circle was there. Then I realized this is important. So I started to pay a little bit more attention to that, and saw it as a very powerful thing. And as you have all talked about, there's a spiritual element that often is left out of the Western world, particularly when we're dealing with healing aspects within community or individuals, right?
It's not a mechanical thing.
It's not, and that's the point. I mean, and that's the next question: is what are some of those principles and practices or elements of the circle that makes it work with human beings in our relationships?
Well, all right, can I start? I want to say, so I've learned over the years that relationships are medicine.
Mm-hmm.
We are medicine. We are medicine beings. And so when we come together, we create a medicine space. And I've learned that we all have tribal histories, even Europeans, even though we're far removed from them. And so that circles were the way that communities came together to maintain social order. And when Europeans forgot about circle, Indigenous people have continued to carry it. And so now we go into that knowledge space to relearn what really is embedded in us. I think genetically, maybe not in memory, but genetically. And so we belong when it resonates for us. Circles resonate. And I've been in workshops, I've set up tables and chairs and circles. People always gravitate to the circle.
Yeah.
So it feels like the place to belong, and it is the way we share spirit and build community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very.
Well, I think it's about ethical space, right? Willie Ermine talks about ethical space, and when we're in circle process, we are utilizing that ethical space. It's not like, oh, you're Lewis, you're famous, and I'm, just Mary, right? When we sit in circle, we're all human beings, first and foremost, and none of us is greater than or less than, despite whatever kind of education we might have, or everybody's voice is equal, and no voice is less than anybody else's, and that's why I believe it works. Martin Luther King says our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And when we're able to utilize circle process to create that ethical space where we can all come in as human beings, then we really are moving forward the way our ancestors want us to. And I want to thank you for acknowledging our ancestors, because that is really what guides this process. Mm-hmm. As circle facilitators, as a circle keeper, I set up the chairs, I make sure there's coffee, and thank you, Maggie, for bringing the tin bits, because those are things that we can do to help create the environment, but it really is our ancestors that help us to utilize that ethical space. And when we believe in the process, magic does happen, and that's what I tell people. It's magic, but like all magic, you have to believe. You have to believe that it's going to work, and when you do believe and you have your talking piece, I've seen magic and miracles happen time and time again utilizing circle process.
Exactly, and I would totally agree with
I
that.
really like your big word, ethical space.
Right?
Ethical space. Woo, woo.
I like them too. That's why I always say it.
So I want to speak to what I think ethical space is in my worldview. For me, ethical space is safety. Particularly when we come from a society that's oppressive. And so I think that when people want to do circles, first of all, who's facilitating the circle? Does that person have the understanding about the hierarchy within Western society, the hierarchy within, say, the women's shelter movement? How many Aboriginal people are still on that board?
Yeah.
How many Aboriginal people work in the workplace? That is what makes things safe, not circles. If you don't have that social environment, and you have a few Aboriginal staff, you can still have circles.
Mm-hmm.
To get to ethical space, you need systemic changes about equality when we have most of the women in the battered women shelters being Aboriginal. How many Aboriginals work in those facilities? How many are bosses? That makes ethical space. So I think that when we talk about circles, it's also those other things about safety that makes a hell of a difference.
Exactly.
A hell of a difference. And so, we can be nice and pat each other on the head. And we're doing that. We're working on developing an understanding of what ethical space is.
Yes.
But part of ethical space is sometimes systemic. That's what I think.
Love the way you think.
Huh?
I said I just love the way you think.
Did you want to add?
Well,
add
yeah,
to
you
that,
use the
Sharon?
word ethical space. I think, what does that mean? Oh my God, what does that mean, ethical space? What does it mean for me? I don't, I'm not up there. And I thought, okay, I gotta think about this. You're a big thinker, so I gotta make it into my English words.
The only thing I might add to that is that there are always the nonverbal cues
Yes.
in the environment, right?
Yes.
What do we see? What do we feel? What do we
Yeah.
experience? And so the social
With our eyes.
context is really critical. But that circles can level that, needs to invite that diversity
Yes.
into the space. So, and I'm mindful I started the circle, so haven't heard from you about this one.
Oh, well, I don't know what I can add, but my experience with circles has been a very powerful one, and I want to say this in regards to work that you have done, because when I go back, I'm sufficiently old enough to remember when we didn't have words like talking circle, and we didn't, we were just reclaiming things, and because I was hanging out with the Indian Association folks back in the day, that was the only place where I saw it. Right, and it was being utilized quite well by the elders and the leadership at the time.
Men of the day.
Well, women as well, and I yes, in the front the men were there, right? Exactly, but it was the women who were
We have
powerful
our place,
behind it.
Yeah, we have our place.
Yeah, my grandfather had always taught me. He goes, a wise leader knows that if he really wants to know where the community is at, you talk to the women. Because they know. They're looking after the elders, the children, they know the relationships that are going on in the community, and then our responsibility is to provide that support and nurturing and protection and those sorts of things. So,
What was your grandfather's name?
his name was Frank Cardinal. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds like an amazing man.
Oh, he was. He's my great teacher, a
Really?
great philosopher. Yeah, he really was. When we visited, it seemed like we packed in a lot of things all at once. But my grandmother was a very powerful woman as well. She was Métis Cunningham from Lac St. Anne.
We're
Agnes
related,
Cunningham.
eh?
Yes, we are. I've done my genealogy. Absolutely. But so with the circle work, I've found it difficult when we started to bring in this concept of the circle into the Western institutions, from universities to City Hall to corporations. And I think that's a question that's out there right now. While people are listening to what we're saying about the importance of circle, its spiritual strength, its intellectual and emotional strength, they're asking, how can I bring this to my place of work? How can I create that as a way of making decisions and kind of restructuring how we make decisions and how we do our work within any given organization? So we'll start with you, Maggie, to find out your experience in bringing in talking circles into places that they normally are not seen.
Well, I worked in residential school settlement, and I worked for a deputy at the time, and he asked me to set up a meeting in my home territory. And when he asked me, I told him, I'll only do it if you let me do it my way.
Uh-huh.
Keep your handlers away from me. Keep their paws off me. I'll do it. So I said, first of all, you're going to sit in a circle. Second of all, you're going to hear them first, and you'll talk last, deputy.
Yeah.
You'll talk last. You're there to listen.
Yep.
And so his handlers were not happy with me, but that was okay, because he had a new world of being able to hear about residential school and how litigation is affecting them. You know what he did when he met with the executives? He said, I always talk first, and he says, and you as assistant deputies, he says, you all have to listen to me. He says, you guys are going to talk first. He said, and I'm going to talk last.
Yeah.
I'm going to listen to you. I thought, thank you, Jesus. You know, I mean, he's only one deputy, but you know what? The world opened up for me. I thought, okay, there is hope, you know. So yes, it can work, but really it depends on the openness, I think, of the people that you're working with. In my case, I was really fortunate that I had a deputy that actually listened to me. If he didn't listen to me, I wouldn't do it. I told him, I'm not going over there. I'm not going to pull any wool over anybody's eyes on your behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we often talk about circles as talking circles, but they are listening circles, and the
Yeah.
quality of a circle is determined more by listening.
Yep.
And so we create that space for voice to contribute and for each of us to listen. And there's a teaching around that, let us put our minds together and see what life we can build, right? Is that we need to hear everybody's perspective, because I can't see what that person on the other side of the circle is seeing, right? I can only see what I see sitting here. What you see, Lewis, you need to share. And it's when we share all of that we get a more complete understanding about what's going on, right? So whether it's a family issue or a community issue or an organizational goal that we have, you can embed circles everywhere, and then you start that process we ground, at Blue Quills we ground it in the classrooms and staff meetings and everything, always with a smudge, with a prayer.
Yes.
And invite Creator. Our late elder George Britton would remind us all the time, when we make a circle, Creator sits here with us, right? So when we use circle in all of those places, we get inclusive, collaborative outcomes, and we support what we've helped build, because we've all been a part of that in contributing our voice, right? So as a social work educator, I used to think, because we do so many circles at Blue Quills or in the education, I would think, oh great, people are going to go out and they're going to do circles with people, with families, and then they weren't.
Yes.
And so I had to back up and rethink that, and then I understood that being a circle keeper has a particular responsibility, that we often know how to come together in circle and be good circle participants, but we also need to understand what it means to be a circle keeper or a circle facilitator. So we, in our groups course, circle is what we train people in. So that they're comfortable being a circle facilitator. And we almost had to break the circle apart so people really understood there is structure here. There is structure.
Yes.
There is a way of moving it forward, and you need to understand that cognitively and then put it all back together so that you create that space.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to pick up where Sharon left off there in regards and touch on what Maggie said, the step 1, step 2, and breaking down of the circle. I think for a lot of organizations that are not used to utilizing circle process, they feel like they might need to do that. But I agree with what Maggie says. It's not rocket science, and it's not a brain science. It is a natural way of being. And when we can be our authentic selves, this process becomes more natural. Like Sharon said, we're all tribal people. Some of us are more disconnected from that than others. But when we come together, because we do it naturally, like we sit around campfires, right? We sit around our dinner tables and stuff like that. We don't necessarily see that as being circle process, but it is coming together in a circle, right?
Exactly.
And when we can do that, it doesn't matter where you work, it doesn't matter how you work. I use circle process at home with my family.
Yeah.
I've used circle process in every job that I've had, and I've worked in schools, I've worked in children's services, I've worked in, other organizations, and I've always found a way to utilize circle process. Like Sharon says, everybody should have a circle in their back pocket so they can pull it out whenever they need it, right?
Exactly.
And it's going to save the world, and I believe that too.
I agree. You've all touched on the fact that the circle is an ancient tradition, and that we are hardwired as human beings to be together. In the Western paradigm of thinking, we're taught about the rugged individualist, as if a person lives entirely by themselves in a vacuum, and that is not true. That's a part of the reason why we have the social issues we do in this society, is because we've disconnected ourselves from that greater reality of the circle. And the circle, and all human beings, as you pointed out, have had that circle as a part of their indigenous traditions as far back as you can see. 60,000 years ago, they find these circles within these ancient cave sites. In Lascaux, France, in rock art in Australia, in South Africa, in Russia. The circle has been a part of our humanity for a very long time, and because they knew even then how powerful that circle was. And it is a place of transformation, has been my experience with it. I've seen, and I'll use one example here, but I won't mention names, one of the most curmudgeonly city councillors in Edmonton City Council, when we're trying to do the Urban Aboriginal Accord relationship agreement development, was very skeptical about sitting in circle. It was a navel-gazing exercise, is what he was saying. It was too snuggly and huggly, is what he was saying. It was, okay, well, so just sit through a couple. Promise me that, see how it goes. Well, I mean, like, we didn't even do the fourth one, and the third one, he goes, this is a great way to do things. You really connect with people, and so he started this discussion in City Hall about, let's have a circle on that. So an issue would come up, and there'd be disagreement. He goes, okay, let's have a circle on that.
That's right.
See, it's about transformation. So the question is, what types of transformations have you seen with people being involved in the circle? And you mentioned that as well. So
I want to talk about transformation. I'm really, the older I get, the more I have attention to words. You use the word hardwired.
Yes.
I thought, oh my God. No, that's not in my world, okay? Hardwired. And you use the word authentic self. I thought, oh my God, our authentic self was happening before the circle happened. Sharon tried to make you and I behave, That was our authentic self. But I don't know what you mean by the authentic self. What I know is my authentic self is very different than what I see in 90% of the circles. Mm-hmm. There are blank cell phones. Yeah. And people are, they're on they're texting to the person across the circle, and I think my authentic self at that point wants to get violent. And then you talk about respectful, It's not respectful.
That's right.
It's not, that's talk about being hardwired. Those machines are hardwired, and they have no place in circle.
Yes.
No place,
Absolutely.
And I think that it's so heinous that people think the people they want to talk to across the way is so important that it should disrupt the circle. I don't think so. Am I a little choked with that?
Yeah.
Being hardwired? Yes, I am.
Yeah. I should say synaptically connected.
What kind of word?
Synaptically connected. But he is right. The neuroscience, the emerging neuroscience around brain development, and
I just had brain injury, so
it just all confirms what Indigenous people have always known, is that we are meant to be in relationships. We grow in relation. I learned that from you. People heal in relationships. They get sick in relationships. It's all about relationships, right? So our brains are hardwired to be in relationships. So when we don't raise our children in a good relational space, they go out and they find addictions to address that that lack of relational.
How to be hardwired.
Brain, brain building. So there's lots we do know. So, I think about, we come together, and Kate has offered tobacco, and we typically open circle with ceremony of some kind, smudge and a prayer. And that is to ground us, to be mindfully present, to bring our intentions to be here in a good way, to clear the clutter of what we brought into the room with us, right? So when we come into ceremony, we are just inviting ourselves to be present in the best way possible. That's our authentic self, to walk our truth, to be our truth, right?
Yeah.
And to contribute our truth in a way that is expressive of self without hurting others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the authentic self.
I
got it. You got it.
I know. I think no. I listen to you and I hear you saying that in a really kind way. She's giving me the look. Eh? Behave yourself, Meg. So about water spirit. It's not only what comes out of here. It's also what our eyes and our water spirit, and what our water spirit sees, feels, and experiences within our brain system. And I think that we never, ever talk about eye tone in circles. People just don't do it. They just use it,
Yeah.
But my God, it's such a important and it has so much about colonization and who's on top, even how we've adopted colonization within our own communities, of who's boss,
Yeah.
I think that there's not enough said about our water spirit,
Yeah.
and our responsibility with the water in our mouth and the water in our eyes in circles, because that's part of spirituality and it's part of responsibility.
Yeah.
And I like being my authentic self when I'm behaving myself, but man, I can really misbehave. So
You can be a brat.
Yeah, that's right. So I need to grow up. I'm 75, but I get there eventually. When you talk about the authentic self. I wish I was a Virgin Mary, but I'm 8,000 miles from the Virgin Mary. So my authentic self is a little bit naughty sometimes. Okay, my authentic self.
Yeah. You're leaving
And now that
yourself
I've gone
open.
through confession, I'm good.
So the question was, transformation. What type of transformations have you seen work within the circle work that you've done?
I see it in individuals all the time. People who, so Mary referred earlier to a feather, so we often use a talking piece. And to be heard, knowing that you're not being judged, you're not being interrupted, to really, truly be heard, for people to listen, is healing. And I see that happen for people all the time. And we do a lot of work with families in conflict, and families are surprised that they can come together, they can make good decisions in spite of the history, in spite of the difficulties and the conflicts. They can come together and they can do good work.
Yes.
And so I see people shake hands and hug each other after, because they're really humbled by the fact that they were able to accomplish something good when they didn't believe they could coming into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
The words you say are so rich. I just think I found my groove. Really, isn't she? What she said,
absolutely.
rich. Eh?
Oh yes.
That is so rich. I'm. Sometimes when I do these things, I think, okay, but today what you just said, I thought that you are bloody off. Awesome. Awesome.
Well, I just want to say one thing about holding that talking piece as well, using a talking piece. So we don't do that with mature circles, usually people who know how to come together in circle. But with kids and new groups and people who are unfamiliar, right, is that you use a talking piece because it establishes the rhythm of the listening.
That's right, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So people are reminded who has the talking piece is the speaker. Everybody else is actively listening. You're not rehearsing what you're going to say when it's your turn, because if you're doing that, you're not listening.
That's right.
Right? So we just remind people of all of that protocol. And then we establish that listening rhythm. Whatever the topic is in the middle, you offer whatever you need to offer at that particular point in time.
That's right.
Yeah. That was all I wanted to add, was around the talking piece.
I think for myself, I've done enough circles. I could probably write a book on the transformations that I've seen. But I think this, regardless of what kind of circle you're using, every time you can give back voice, you are creating change. And I think what Maggie talks about is true. Like, we have all of these systematic policies that are put into place to silence us. Since 1492, we've been pushed aside. You know, go over there, go on your reserve, here's your rotten rations. We've been silenced. Circle process gives us back our voice.
Yes.
And every time, I don't care who it is, I don't care where it is, anytime you can give back voice, you are giving back a piece of that power.
That's right.
You are giving back something that was taken away 7 generations ago or whatever, right? So the more that we can do that, especially with our children, when we were in Head Start, my daughter was 2 years old, we were utilizing circle process with 2 and 3-year-olds.
Yeah.
And the things that would come out of their mouth was just amazing, you know? And so there's no reason why you wouldn't do it. And there's so many reasons why you would want to do it. And the transformations that come out of there, they're magic.
Yes.
They really are. Like Sharon said, I've seen people hug, you know, not only that, but I've seen people, like, especially when we're doing family group conferencing, right? And we have that us and them mentality with children's services, right?
Yes.
And never shall we cross that line, right?
Yes.
That positional power that caseworkers are in, holding people's children over their heads, right? Oh, do this if you want to visit. Oh, you got to do that if you want to visit. And oftentimes those expectations are unrealistic. But like Sharon said, when you put people in a circle and you give them voice, parents know what they can do.
Yes.
Realistically, they know what they can do. We were keeping our families safe long before child welfare came into our lives. We knew how to keep each other safe.
Yes.
When we were growing up, we knew where to run. We knew where to go. We didn't need somebody to make a safety plan for us or tell us. We just knew those things because of our families, of our environment, how we grew up. We knew how to keep ourselves safe. And when we have somebody telling us, I don't know, probably Maggie would agree, when somebody tells me what to do, I tell them where to go.
Yes.
I don't need people to tell me what to do. I already know what to do.
Yes.
And those defenses automatically come up, right? When somebody says, okay, well, you got to go to rehab. Okay, well, you have to do this if you want to visit with your children. You know, defenses go up and people, no, I'm not going to do that. But when you ask them, what can you do? They'll tell you what they can do and then they'll do it.
Exactly.
And so circle process allows for that space to happen where we can give back voice. And I'll say circle process, like, I'm not going to say everything because we're on camera, but it transformed me. It really did.
Yes.
It turned me, what does William call me, a barroom brawler?
Yeah.
Into a social worker. Well, I grew up in Greward.
Oh, there you are.
One of the
That was
words
Tucker
you-
Creek. So.
One of the words you use and you use is the word power, you know?
Yes.
Power. I think words carry a lot of weight. And when we're talking about circle process, Peter O'Chise used to talk about people who talk about power and how all of that had to do with control. And he said that when we have our community, and he didn't use the word circle, but he's in community we have circle. He said we have strength. And he says the strength is like steel. It brings all these different metals together and it makes steel. So I think circle has strength,
Yes,
not power.
very good.
And I think that is the rebalancing of the power to the collective. What all the
Yes.
little nice words
Yeah.
you're using, you use so perfect words to describe circle in terms of the elements
Yes,
of what it gives that. And I think that, I think power, in my opinion, has nothing to do with circle.
yes.
I think strength has to do
yeah.
with circle. And
Exactly,
as we
yeah.
get more stronger,
Yeah.
then we become those change agents for systemic change,
Yes.
you know? But we never do that by ourselves,
Yeah.
you know? Healing our spirit worldwide was not done by me. It was done by people across the world,
Yeah.
you know? People would never do it by ourselves.
I-
So I think words are so important
They are.
when we talk about circle.
Yes.
They are
That's it.
powerful,
I
exactly.
like
Yeah.
that. I like the point you made there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good point.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
use that.
Yeah, I'm
It's
gonna use that.
words, but
I like that
the older I
much
get,
better.
the more I think about, like, when you say authentic self, I thought, holy shit, what's my authentic self? You know,
Walking slower.
That's my authentic self.
I know that we'll be breaking off fairly shortly with questions from our listeners.
All right.
But one more question, at least one more question I want to ask is, and I think it's it's the big question for our listeners as well. And first of all, I want to say I like the word strengthen. It's a heck of a lot better. Power has always been a default because I've been in politics a little bit too long, I think.
Yeah.
So you kind of use words that are just familiar to you. But strengthen is an excellent an excellent.
Yeah,
word.
Peter O'Shea's, give credit
Yes.
to Peter O'Shea's.
Oh yes,
you know.
certainly, Elder
I mean,
Peter
I
O'Shea's.
thought he was
Yeah.
he was so magical. And as an old man, he was very sexy too. But that's going to circle nothing.
That's another topic.
Eye of the beholder.
That's another circle.
We'll have a circle on that. But so
Cut that.
yeah. So how does an organization, whatever organization that may be, use the circle process today in their work? Any suggestions, recommendations, insights?
Go ahead. I talked too much already.
Well, I think so. For us, every staff meeting is a circle. We build the agenda collectively, and then we speak to it. Whoever put the agenda item on leads the discussion, but everybody has opportunity contribute voice. Strategic planning
Yes.
is a circle,
Yes.
right? So sometimes the receptionist has a better idea about what we should be doing than the president. So you get that collective strength. The answers are in the circle. The wisdom is in the circle. The wisdom is in the family, not out there and experts and consultants. They might have a role to contribute, but really the wisdom is in the circle. So facilitating that process of collective voice, right? And consensus building gets you to what you can realistically accomplish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you should just do it. You know, there is no right or wrong way to do a circle in my mind. I think if your heart is in the right place and your intentions are good and you invite spirit in, you could do it anytime, anywhere, and you'll never go wrong
Exactly.
if your heart and your mind are in the right place.
You know, Sharon, you brought up, which, a truism is that we're all in a circle and we all have different perspectives because we're sitting in that circle.
Yeah.
So we see some things different. And when we sit in circle, the experience that I've had is that each person is carrying a bit of that answer to a puzzle
That's right.
because they're seeing
Right.
something that we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we do sit in circle and we share the way that we do, we're really building that, three-dimensional, multi-dimensional
Yeah.
understanding of whatever issue may be there. And what I've seen happen is the most quietest voice
Yeah.
will present the most powerful idea.
Yes.
And if we don't have that opportunity, we're
Right.
missing,
Right.
a whole
Right.
lot of opportunity for change and building
Yeah.
and strengthening within
Yeah.
our community. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think organization development, family development is so because really what we do, we recreate family, and at least in the Aboriginal organization, maybe not white organizations within, and we create our own, our own reality in our workplaces. Because one of the benefits is that we have the same culture when we work in Aboriginal organizations.
Yeah.
I'll give you a really quick snapshot. I think that Nietzsche was. I get nervous when I listen to you guys talking about it. We're so idealistic. Hey man, I've never lived in an idealistic world ever in my life, I've had hills and valleys and things in my workplace and in my family life, and in our circle life. Mm-hmm. And within Nietzsche, one of the things that we work really hard at is trying to be that frontline worker and be a role model about that frontline worker that we were training. And then we ran into a bump at Nietzsche, and so I said I had a really important staff member that was she looked sane. And so I said, I think we're having a little bump here, and in our staff circle, staff said some pretty hard things, as organizations can do. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, what am I going to do? We have this circle and we have this truth. So I asked her whether she would be willing to go away for codependency treatment. Mm-hmm. I had no other answers. I didn't. Mm-hmm. She said, okay. And so, so $15,000 later, she comes back, from the States. She's come back and she said, I was really mad at you when you sent me away. I said, oh, I know. She says, but I got news for you, Maggie. You sent me away because I was really unwell. She says, the whole organization's sick. That's what Circle does,
Yes.
You get bloody truth, Yes. So I thought, okay, what are we going to do now? $15,000 times 15? No, I can't afford it. Yeah. So I told him, now we're bringing the psychologists from that program, and my board and my staff and I will all go to codependency treatment together. If we're all sick, we're going to get well together. Yeah. So when I look back at it now, I was either insane. It really, really worked well, But what sane person would do that,
Yes.
I think we talk about circles, as being so solution-oriented. But by God, we've got to also talk about the bumps, and that was I'm describing a bump that was awesome,
Yes.
It built another Mount Everest,
Yes. Yeah.
And it smoothed out the relationships between us. Not that we had a difficult relationship, but we're human beings, and we're all wounded people,
Exactly.
as Aboriginal people.
Yeah.
So, and it's so awesome, I'm the woman that went away. I'm friends with her like 35 years later, still, Thank you, Jesus, So I think that. I don't want us to make ourselves so honey and syrup because, hey man, it's tough work, circle work.
It is tough work.
It's tough work, and it's not easy, And I think that you got to stay the course and see and find the answers over a longer period of time.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and it takes courage to put tough stuff in the middle of a circle.
It is.
And courage is. Maggie Hodgson Badger said, courage is fear with the prayer. At that time I was really praying. I said, okay, God, what the hell did I do now?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to bring in this, and we're going to go for codependency treatment with my board, my staff, and myself.
Mm-hmm.
Who does that? Same people don't do that, but it worked.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Can I just say one more thing about the relational temple?
Yeah, it's a big deal. Really big
Is that
deal.
I had a linguist friend who taught me years ago that all cultures have different speaker-responder tempos. Mm-hmm. So the communication tempo in European society is like we're 3 seconds speaker-responder, very quick.
Oh yes.
Indigenous communities, other cultures have a more reflective tempo, and so there's a 6 second speaker responder process, right? So I, as part of my role, I supervise students in different agencies everywhere, and I will hear an agency say, we don't think she's a good fit for us, she never offers her voice, we don't know what she thinks, and the student is saying, I have things to say, but they never listen to me. I don't know. And what was happening was a staff meeting was going like this, right? And typically those who have are quicker. Some people will do a lot of the talking. Some people never get heard from. And so I asked the agency to slow it down. Just use a circle and a talking piece if you need to remind yourself you're creating a space for everybody's voice to be heard. And that student contributed her voice and had that powerful messages to contribute, right? But until you actually create that space for that quieter voice to come forward, you can miss out on a lot.
It's true. Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you.
I think that's so important.
But
But that's also about cultures and understanding
is.
how different cultures come together.
Yes, it
We
is.
work
it is.
together.
But a circle will level all of that,
Exactly.
right?
Yes, it does.
So it doesn't matter what your cultural orientation, your ethnic background, whatever, is that circle creates that space for
Exactly.
everybody to be heard.
And I think that there's an inherent fear within some organizations that if you are the president, vice president, CEO, or COO, or what have you, is that somehow your power is going to be, usurped.
in some way,
But in
yeah.
fact, it doesn't actually. It clarifies your role as that and the responsibilities you need to carry out.
Yeah.
So it's not about taking away anything; it's actually giving, and that's the wonderful thing.
Yeah.
About circles. So we are now going to see if there's
Before we turn
questions.
to our listeners, I want to tell you something.
Sure.
I'm really happy you're here
Oh, thank you.
because I think you bring a whole different mix to a woman's worldview. And I think that we have men's worldview in our circles. And I think I'm happy you're here because it makes a difference. I think it really makes a difference.
Okay.
Your men's spirit is different, much as you're loving and kind. And
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Now to the questions.
Okay, so I'll just say that some of my experience is that if you're a non-circle person or non-Indigenous, sometimes we have to unlearn some bad habits, meaning we can't step in and be somebody else's voice. We're there in our family group conferences, our family group decision making, or family circles, whatever you call them. We ask everybody to have a supporter, but that supporter is there for emotional support. And sometimes you can call, that person will say, I need a break or whatever, but we need to let them find their voice, right? So an advocate is, it's always kind of a challenging role because you cannot be somebody else's voice. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you shouldn't speak for issues, but yeah, we have to be really mindful we're not taking somebody else's space.
Yeah.
I agree with that partly because you're speaking, they're not taking their voice. However, what I see and I've experienced so often is if you have a non-Aboriginal advocate, okay, and you have a non-Aboriginal social worker, and then you have the client, the social worker talks to the advocate,
Yeah.
as if the Indian's invisible. It's not their kids, and the advocate is so wanting to help that they offer all of their opinions instead of saying, okay, Mary here, Mary, can you talk about your journey the last while, of moving towards sobriety and connecting to your family? Is knowing whose space you're in and why you're in that space, and do not continue to be the colonizer and the oppressor out of good intent.
Yeah.
God bless us.
Yeah, that's. We have a lot of people who have been silenced because we have, unfortunately, in the Western world, we have, teachers are better educators, doctors are better healers, social workers are better parents, whatever, is that we have trained people to be service recipients. So do we really allow them to contribute their voice in an authentic way? And I think that space needs to be, we need to rethink what we're doing as helpers.
Yeah.
We need to be what?
Rethink what we're doing as helpers,
Okay.
how we're helping.
Okay, thank you.
Because we do want that voice to come forward, and because of the colonial history, the Indigenous voice has been silenced even more. So it's not unusual to see non-Indigenous organizations with a high caseload of Indigenous people, and there's complexities in that history, and there's power differentials. And so the people who have the power, the social worker, the advocate, the helpers, right, need to understand their work in a different way. It needs to, circles are a restorative process. It brings people, people who have harmed together with people who have been harmed. And so in this world, it's the non-Indigenous people who have often harmed Indigenous. Like, there's a real power imbalance. So we need to restore power to strength to everybody. The circle will do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're still my teacher. Sorry, does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'll just agree with what Sharon has to say. I think we have to be careful when we're advocating to make sure that we are holding space for the people that we're advocating for, and not taking up that space and saying, oh, well, they need this, they need that, we have to always give voice. The more times you can give voice. I have nothing against advocacy. Like I said, when we're doing family group conferencing, we ask everybody to bring a support person. And when I'm meeting with that support person, I'm very clear as to what their role is. And your role is not to contribute voice, but to just sit and support the person that you're there to support. Don't speak unless you're asked to speak. Don't offer your opinion because you think you're right, because that's not your role. Even though you might have all the answers, unless you're asked, don't speak.
Very good.
When I hear you say that, I just want to get up and do my grandma dance. And it's so good. I thought, oh my God, that's... If I could take this out of, and just put it into, and just play it in YouTube all across the world. Yes, amen. Christians say amen. I feel like saying amen. That's so
Me
cool.
too, that's what I feel like saying when you talk.
Very good.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Thank you.
Oh my.
Next question.
I think automatically, we can give circles any kind of name we want. It can be talking circle, sharing circle, whatever circle. The bottom line is they're a circle. And to automatically think that, okay, we're going to do a healing circle. Come, Maggie, I'm going to heal you. Right?
That's when I heard that question, I thought,
Right?
that was my reaction to the question. Oh my God.
Because I think we're already putting ourselves in that position of, I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to heal you.
Yeah.
And we are not here to heal anybody. Circles are not here to heal anybody. Circle is a place to offer voice. Out of that might come healing, but there's no guarantee that, because you're calling it a healing circle, that there's healing going to happen there. That's no guarantee. People will heal when they're ready to heal. And really, in my experience, the only people that really heal are the people that think they're sick. For myself personally, I don't feel that I'm sick, so you could invite me to any healing circle that you want. I would contribute my voice, but I wouldn't walk out of there saying, hallelujah, I'm healed. So we have to be very mindful, like Maggie said, with our words. And the more that we can create a space for dialogue, then out of that may come healing. But to say that, okay, we're going to do a healing circle and women are going to heal from this is a misrepresentation.
But we do know, just to say something about healing, is that what we share about ourselves with each other heals each other.
Exactly.
It creates a healing space. And so we don't talk healing, we offer voice around anything. And sometimes we need to be really mindful that we're not prescribing a curriculum.
Yes.
That you need to go, now we're on lesson 2, chapter 3, whatever. Sometimes when you're in a circle space, you can start a topic. Think of those rocks you can buy with different words on them: kindness, love, courage. And somebody takes one out, and the circle is about, this is what this word means to me.
Yeah.
It's a totally neutral way of getting people into deep discussion about something, right, that hasn't been laid on by the facilitator, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes the curriculum takes precedence over the process, and really it's the process.
Yes.
It's the circle is that's what you want to have happen.
Not the content.
It's not about the content.
It's about the process.
Yeah.
That's right.
And there's an undertone to the question that I really think that circles sometimes are quite intentional. Probably, in real life, circles 80% they happen,
Yeah.
They're created by families, in situations or workspaces. That conversation that I had with my staff member, I didn't know it was going to manifest into having codependency treatment for, my board, my staff, and myself. I think that there's an intention and a formalization that is different when you talk about space with integrity. That's such a complex way of talking about it. I was talking to Margaret Cardinal, recently. She's one of the elders, and she's saying this government woman said, well, when you meet one of the clients, she says, do you see them in your office? And she says, no, I see them in the hallway.
Yeah.
So sometimes, most times, often, worthwhile conversations and circles are unintentional.
Yeah.
They get intention. And knowing how to transform that circle into an informal setting, that's the magic,
That's true.
because then the strength is in that person and them being able to create their circle space.
And I've seen that in organizations.
Yeah.
What they would say is gather around the water cooler,
Yeah.
or in the break room.
In what?
Break room. A break room.
Yeah,
A
break
lot
room,
of
okay.
companies or corporations
Okay.
or organizations will have staff rooms,
Okay.
and then you'll see that circle
Yeah.
kind of naturally form
Yeah.
itself.
Form, yeah. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So,
And then you invite that, could you bring that into
yeah.
Yes.
a larger discussion,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A
Yes.
circle conversation, yeah.
That's where the strength is built.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, well, I think it's important that circle keepers know that they're not responsible for content. I mean, it may be that you brought in a teacher, an elder, or a video, or a stone, or something, because you want a conversation in a particular way, but content is not the responsibility of the circle keeper. They are more conscientious about maintaining the process. Is everybody being heard? If somebody is talking over long, the circle keeper may have to interrupt. Hard to do when you have an elder in the group, but
Yeah.
I've had to do that. I just say, we have so many people and we only have so much time, and we need to hear from everybody at least once before the circle breaks. So if you're going on over long, I may have to interrupt, and that's not out of disrespect for the speaker, but out of respect for the rest of the group. So I've had to interrupt elders and others, and I've never had anybody chastise me for that, because you put it up front, you say it up front, right? So they know. And sometimes we do go on, and where are we going with this? So we just need to remind people, can we, just move on. Anyway, That whole role of circle keeper is about making sure the emotional tone stays safe. Maggie's you used the word earlier, safety. Safety is everything. Spiritual safety, emotional safety, mental safety, physical safety. So it's about all of that. And the circle keeper needs to be mindful if people are starting to use their words with anger. You can be angry, but you can't be blaming, right? And you can't be shaming others. So the circle keeper would monitor that and may ask the group, we're at this place, what do we do now? The group can provide an answer, take a time out, whatever. There's strategies and techniques you need to be mindful of as a circle keeper, but there's some good resources out there, and find somebody who's a circle keeper and be a co-facilitator.
Yeah.
That's one of the best ways to learn, just to experience the process, pay attention to the circle keeper role.
Yeah.
And you may not offer anything around the content yourself. You can, but you don't need to, and it should be appropriate and not overwhelm, not take over the group. So, because you're not the expert, you're the circle keeper, right? That's what you're the expert in, the process.
I agree with you 100%. I also think that the word keeper has a connotation of controller. And that's not what you meant, but that's the undertone of
Facilitator.
it. And I think that that's a risk. Risk in white society. And I think, and in our society too, however, I think that our undertone that fits in the middle of circles is that we're all teachers, we're all medicine people, we're all healers, we're all doctors,
We're all learners.
We're all learners. That's the undertone, which is different than keeper, the word keeper, And so I think that there when there is a circle keeper, sometimes that shifts, and say you're the starter and then it moves over to you for whatever reason, And that comes from that undertone of we share these gifts.
Yeah.
So that's the substantive difference between the Western, who's got control, to where is the strength and how do we build more strength within our community or within that circle.
Yeah, and it's not a policing role.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's the
Because as a circle
undertone.
facilitator, you would do some coaching up front, is that we all in the circle hold ourselves collectively responsible for the guidelines, right? That we're going to be listeners and not interrupting, not blaming, not shaming, all of those kinds of things, right? So we all hold ourselves collectively for that. So I might, as a facilitator, I might be a reminder, but I'm not the police. I'm not, policing the process.
I think circle process is like ceremony, and the only way that you can really experience it is to immerse yourself in it. We could talk about, going to a round dance and what they do at a round dance, but you won't really know until you actually attend a round dance. And circle process is the same thing, I think.
Yes.
If you really want to understand it, you have to be a part of it.
Right, and because, the value, the strength of it too, is that it's a ceremony. And like any ceremonies that we acquire or are gifted with are earned. And I'm supporting your statement there, is that you need to be able to be involved with it, to be working with experienced facilitators, knowledgeable ones, elders who will help you learn how to work with it. It's something that requires a deeper commitment emotionally and spiritually to the process in order to become a truly effective facilitator.
But it can offer, so the textbook we use in our group circle course is The Circle Way. And there is a website, thecircleway.org, I think it is. Anyway.
Who did that? You guys?
The author is Baldwin. No.
She could have done it.
She
could have done it.
When I first read it, I thought, oh my goodness, I wish I had written this. But anyway, and that's non-Indigenous, but a long history of doing circle work. There's Indigenous resources. I do training in schools around facilitating circles in schools. And there's a great 7 lesson plans, which has all of the circle elements and all the readiness you need to be a circle facilitator in schools and classrooms. So there's a number of resources.
And you do the training at Blue Quills.
Yeah, we do circle training, or we can go out and do circle training. But anyway, I would say if somebody wants to do some reading, because I think we need to be self-directed about our own learning. There's still not a lot of people doing circle work. And it takes time to develop comfort with it. But I think once you do it, and it's restorative.
Yeah.
It's the right work to be doing with our women, with our families, because it sounds like I have the power to give, but they take back their power.
Yeah.
They find their power, they find their voice, they find their strength. And I had a family come back one time and say, you taught us about circle process, we do that now. It's part of our family process. And that's what you want, is people who just have a tool, who can listen to each other and put tough stuff in the middle of the circle, right? And who can achieve some decision making around that. So, as Mary said, it's not rocket science, but it does take a skill, a different way of being in relationship with issues. So go to thecircleway.org and it's...
I agree with you in terms of by doing it, talking about just doing it. And that's one way. And the other way is also looking at formal, getting training. However, I think that there's an undertone to the question, and I think, if you want to pull my hair out. I was at a research meeting in New York with all kinds of big oompas, and they were wanting evidence, about what Aboriginal people did, and is there scientific evidence to prove what we say is true? And that's kind of the undertone of that question is that. And I think that what you're talking about is doing it, and when I work in Western society, they say, can you give me a book, that I can read, Can I watch a video that'll give me that? And good for them, I do try to share with them those things. I think that what you're talking about is the experience. I think that spirit, you can't dissect spirit. You can't dissect group. When we're in circle and when we're doing circle as part of our natural way, and for God's sakes, it could come into our organizations, come across the street, we won't fight you, and be in our circles and see what we do. It doesn't mean what we're doing is right, but we've been doing it for a while, so we actually know what we're doing. I think reaching out and getting past Western fear of saying, can I come and learn from you in your organizations and how you're doing circles? That doesn't make us smarter or other people. It's just that there's different ways, learn different ways, and it's another way of learning things. Or you can watch a video. That's not engaging your body, mind, and spirit. I'm sorry, it's engaging your head, Yeah. I think so. I think that asking that question is very Western.
Well, So it's not to, you're using both Western science and Indigenous wisdom, but a book will not replace a relationship.
That's right.
So it's the relational learning that Mary is talking about, and so we
And when I'm
encourage.
talking about going across the street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we encourage people to support each other in building that space. And you learn as you go.
Yeah.
You can get knowledge, but again, it's not a substitute for relational building, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.